Do they, try and find another cheap trade like they did with Dotson? Dotson was, pretty cheap trade that they had, who was a former first rounder or a first rounder, and I forget what year with the Commanders. What do you think they do at wide receiver 3, and how much more important is this position in the new offense as opposed to what it was in the other offense that they ran, which didn't really get the wide receiver 3 all that involved?
No, in theory, it should be much more important. So they got to get somebody to play wide receiver 3, and potentially wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, depending.
Which is a tough one. Tough.
Yeah. So obviously, but if you're operating that AJ will be back, so you just need somebody wide. Jahan Dotson will not be back. I don't know what he ran coming out of Penn State, but it was really good because obviously he was like the 16th pick in the draft, so he ran 4.4-ish, and that's how quickly he'll be running out of the building to get more of an opportunity somewhere. And I don't expect him to get a big free agent deal. I expect him to have to, sign a one-year prove-it deal somewhere. But to me, he'll be looking for a bigger opportunity to try to resuscitate his career. So, I mean, you got to get somebody in-house. Again, a lot of people excited about Darius Cooper. I don't know if you can count on that. I don't think that's the way to go about it. So, but as I've said pretty clearly, and you've seen it over the past 5 years or so, there's no position where you can find more ready to play contributors in the NFL draft than receiver, just because of how the game is played at the college level. There's a boatload of receivers every year. If you draft correctly, and I'm talking third round, I'm not talking first round.
Right. You don't even need to go premium rounds anymore. Yeah.
You can find a contributor, and I think that's the way the Eagles will go about it. To try and, again, this is in the best case scenario. You gotta have a real plan if you're moving on from AJ Brown. If you're just trying to get a wide receiver 3, I think you can get that in the draft. So so much of this offseason depends on what happens with AJ Brown, because it changes so many things at so many levels. And certainly when you boil it down to one position, and then you go into camp, if you do it, say you draft a wide receiver in the 3rd round, and you say, all right, go compete with Darius Cooper for that job, and then let the best man win.
Right.
And that's a pretty good plan. But there's so many receivers.
Now you mentioned in theory that the wide receiver 3 should be more important, and I agree with you. I said that as well. Where this offense is different than the other offense. Will it actually though? Is that the game of Jalen and this offense? I know they're going to switch, but
it's a good question. I don't think it is, and other people think I'm a hater. And
well, you're not being a hater. I mean, and John, just entertain me as a football dummy compared to you. This new offense does rely on spreading the football to way more targets, doesn't it? That's why the running backs are used out of the backfield so much. That's why there's so much in the short pass game. This is why the 49ers sent what they did to trade for Christian McCaffrey, because he's got such the right skill set for his offense. Don't you need to spread the ball more in this offense, or is that
you don't need to. I mean, the Rams are the best example because they changed this year from what Sean McVay's typically been, because they had some injuries at wide receiver. And, basically for a long stretch there when Devontae Adams went down, it was basically Puka or bust at wide receiver, who had a phenomenal year. And then they got all the tight ends involved. So you can do it different ways. It doesn't have to be. The more traditional way would be the 3rd receiver. But, the Rams happen to have 57 tight ends who can play. The Eagles don't have any tight ends under contract.
The Eagles have 0 right now that can play.
Well, they have 2 guys. E.J. Jenkins. They have futures guys.
Yeah, you're not trotting E.J. Jenkins out and playing 13 first round.
Team Bell.
Yeah.
But, so you can do it different ways. But, the easiest way is to get the 3rd receiver involved. But you got to have a 3rd receiver too. And maybe it's as simple as Darius Cooper. He showed some signs. Can block too. That's important in this offense to have receivers who block, and he showed that he could do that.
Will that be as important?
Yeah, I think it's very. I see. You could argue that's even more important because when you stretch it as much as they
right.
do,
Got to get guys in the second level.
yeah. And if you've seen, Puka and Cooper Kupp are just phenomenal blockers. So if you can find that level of blocker, a wide receiver, and Darius Cooper's really thick, really strong. And he was such
clean up some of the mental lapses he had last year. Though,
like he's a rookie. He's a rookie out of Tarleton State.
Yeah, that's true. Sure.
You're counting on some development. But what I liked about Darius Cooper is, look, he only took over that role because Johnny Wilson got hurt. And because he was never asked to block at Tarleton State because he was the biggest playmaker in the country at that level.
He had all their yards every game at Tarleton State.
So I like the fact that he took to it, and just because you're big and you're strong doesn't mean you're physical. He's never been asked to do that, and he showed he can do it. And he also caught the ball when it came to him, which was not often, but that's a positive. I think he had 9 catches last year. So, I do have some hope that he can continue to develop. But you would certainly need a contingency plan at wide receiver 3 and some competition. And I think you can get a guy. I think that 3rd round sweet spots. And I got to look at where the Eagles are pick wise. Because we're going to have to get more in the draft, but that to me, you can find a contributor. And right now they have 2 3rd-round picks, so 68 and 98. That to me is your sweet spot to find a receiver. And just looking you're talking about just looking at big boards. CJ Daniels from Miami. Zachariah Branch from Georgia, Skylar Bell from UConn, Malachi Fields from Notre Dame. He's a big physical guy, though. I don't think he'd fit as a wide receiver. Chris Brazil, Deion Burks. Man, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 players in the top 100 at wide receiver. 16. They grow receivers on trees. That's why during the Carson Wentz era, it was so frustrating that the Eagles couldn't find receivers. It's like everybody finds receivers. Now, I'm not talking about the level of the top tier, but just contributors. It has never been easier to find a receiver.
So we'll see what they end up doing. Does that make it easier potentially to move on from A.J. Brown? In theory, it does, but I don't know. I felt like,
that's different.
And the Eagles are not the Titans, so it's really a bad comp. I understand that, but I remember when the Titans were like, "Yeah, we're going to draft Treylon Burks and to replace A.J. Brown."
Yeah, that's different when you talk about the true top tier guys. Because I went through it with Randy Moss as well with Troy Williamson, who was like the 7th pick in the draft, and they were like the same way. Oh, we're going to replace Randy Moss with Troy Williamson. Not going to work. So AJ's on a different scale, different level. It ain't easy to find players like that, but it's easy to find contributors at that position. And look, if they lose AJ Brown, it's got to be a different plan. You gotta find a more impact. You can't just sit there and wait for 97.
You got to go and get somebody.
Yeah. And maybe Devontae Smith can be a wide receiver 1. He's certainly got the talent. I worry.
Well, he's going to need a better 2 and 3 though than what he's got now. Or what?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, right now it would be Darius Cooper and Johnny Wilson, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think Johnny Wilson is another guy who I think is hurt by the shift in philosophy.
Yeah, majorly.